5:04 p.m., October 17th, 1989. The San Francisco Bay Area should have been gridlocked. Thousands of cars jammed onto the Cypress Freeway and Bay Bridge as rush hour peaked. But that afternoon, the city's attention was elsewhere. Game 3 of the World Series was about to begin. In the next 17 seconds, one of America's deadliest earthquakes would shatter highways, topple buildings, and ignite fires citywide. Officials later revealed a staggering fact. The baseball game kept commuters off the most vulnerable bridges, preventing hundreds of deaths. How did a sports event reshape the fate of a disaster? And could the same unlikely twist save lives today, as new risks grow ever greater? By 5 p.m. on a typical Tuesday, the Cypress Viaduct and Bay Bridge carried a steady river of cars, upwards of 15,000 vehicles an hour on the Cypress stretch alone, and more than 10,000 crossing the Bay Bridge eastbound during peak. But October 17th, 1989, looked nothing like the norm. Traffic sensors and post-event occupancy charts revealed a dramatic drop. The numbers tell the story. On the Cypress Viaduct, vehicle counts fell so sharply that only a fraction of the usual commuters were present when the upper deck collapsed. On the Bay Bridge, the span that failed saw just a handful of cars, not the dozens that would have packed the deck at any other rush hour. Transportation officials and engineers, reviewing the data in the weeks after, compared the expected death toll, hundreds, maybe more, with the actual outcome. The final tally, 42 lives lost on Cypress, 1 on the Bay Bridge. These figures stood in stark contrast to scenario models, which projected 3 to 10 times as many fatalities if traffic had followed its usual pattern. The anomaly was so pronounced that early media reports, unaware of the empty roads, initially estimated casualties in the hundreds. For traffic engineers, the World Series was a natural experiment. The event shifted population patterns, emptied the arteries, and left a statistical fingerprint that would become a case study in disaster mitigation. The vanishing rush hour wasn't just a fluke. It was a measurable, life-saving deviation, caught in real time by the region's own sensors and confirmed by every after-action review. A secretary in downtown Oakland remembers the moment she decided to leave work early. The Giants were playing, and her office was hosting a makeshift viewing party. She later told reporters, "If not for the World Series, I'd have been on the Nimitz Freeway. I owe baseball my life." Stories like hers ripple through the Bay Area's memory of that day. A bartender in the Marina District recalled regulars lingering over one more inning, their usual rush hour drive postponed. One patron, usually first out the door at 5, watched the first pitch from his bar stool instead. He never made it onto the bridge that would soon partially collapse. Television drew thousands home ahead of schedule. In one oral history, an insurance adjuster described how his entire office emptied at 4:30, everyone eager to beat traffic and catch the game from their living rooms. Later, he realized his routine drive would have taken him straight across the Cypress Viaduct at 5:04 p.m. Survivor interviews collected by local journalists echo the same theme. Baseball saved my life. These are not isolated anecdotes. Academic reviews and government reports cite dozens of such testimonials, each one a thread in the fabric of collective luck. The numbers alone can't capture the relief or the guilt some survivors felt. Knowing a simple decision, a detour to a bar, an early exit, a seat on a friend's couch, meant the difference between life and death. The World Series didn't just empty the roads. It filled homes, offices, and gathering places with people who, by accident or intention, stepped out of harm's way. The Cypress Street Viaduct, known locally as the Nimitz Freeway, buckled in seconds. The upper deck pancaked onto the lower, crushing dozens of cars and trapping drivers in a dark, shifting maze of concrete and steel. 42 people died here, more than anywhere else that day. Yet from the moment the dust settled, the rescue effort became a story of raw improvisation. Oakland police and firefighters arrived within minutes, but so did neighbors, off-duty workers, and people who had simply heard the roar and ran toward it. With professional gear slow to reach the scene, volunteers grabbed what they could: car jacks from trunks, wooden ladders from nearby homes, even ropes and garden hoses. Some crawled headfirst into narrow gaps, ignoring the threat of aftershocks. Others formed human chains along the broken structure, passing tools and pulling survivors out. One firefighter later counted 57 people saved, using nothing but car jacks and ladders. The work was frantic and dangerous. Every aftershock rattled the wreckage, sending fresh clouds of dust into the air and forcing rescuers to weigh every second. As the hours wore on, the line between official responder and civilian blurred. People tunneled through debris, called out for voices, and refused to leave until the last accessible space was searched. The Cypress collapse exposed the limits of planning, but it also revealed a kind of spontaneous courage. Ordinary people, working side by side with professionals, refusing to let the disaster claim more lives than it already had. In the Marina district, the ground moved like liquid. Decades-old fill beneath the neighborhood turned to slurry, breaking open gas mains and tilting rows of pastel houses at impossible angles. Within minutes, flames were climbing through ruptured buildings near Beach and Divisadero. Fire hydrants sputtered dry as water mains snapped beneath the shifting streets. Residents, boxed in by smoke and debris, formed bucket lines with whatever they could find: bathtubs, bottles, even pots from kitchens. Some worked in bare feet, passing water hand to hand as fire crept closer to whole blocks. At the harbor, off-duty firefighter John Blackwell raced to the fireboat Phoenix. The city's regular water supply was gone, but the bay itself was endless. Phoenix's crew powered up the pumps, drawing thousands of gallons of seawater per minute and sending it through hoses stretched from the docks, across cracked pavement, into the heart of the marina. Firefighters and civilians, side by side, steered the jets toward burning roofs. City officials later credited the Phoenix with saving dozens of homes and possibly lives by supplying the only reliable water source until the mains could be patched. Across the bay, bridge inspectors moved quickly to the eastern span of the Bay Bridge, where a 50-foot section of the upper deck had dropped onto the lower. The bridge was shut down within the hour. For more than a month, its steel trusses stood empty, a daily reminder of how a single fault line could cut off a city. Repairs stretched into November, with commuters forced onto crowded ferries and alternate routes. The simultaneous crises, fires in the marina, the crippled bridge, exposed just how many lifelines could fail at once. and how survival sometimes depended on improvisation and the right people in the right place. Today, the Bay Area is home to nearly twice as many people as in 1989, with new neighborhoods rising on land once considered too unstable to build. High-rise condos, dense apartment blocks, and sprawling suburbs now crowd the same seismic zones that shook apart 3 decades ago. Yet for all the growth, a silent risk shadows millions of residents. Fewer than 1 in 10 households carry earthquake insurance. Most renters have no coverage at all. The reasons are familiar: high premiums, confusing policies, and a stubborn belief that disaster relief will fill the gap. In reality, government aid rarely covers more than a fraction of rebuilding costs. For homeowners and renters alike, a major quake today could mean losing everything with no financial safety net. As property values soar and the region's population climbs, the stakes have never been higher or more unevenly shared. Engineers have spent decades reinforcing the Bay Area's lifelines. Since 1989, more than 1,000 bridges have been retrofitted to withstand violent shaking. The new eastern span of the Bay Bridge stands as a symbol of this investment, designed from the ground up for seismic resilience. But progress isn't universal. Thousands of older apartment buildings and schools still await upgrades, especially in dense neighborhoods. State emergency officials point to Shake Alert, the region's earthquake early warning system, as a breakthrough. In the best scenarios, it can deliver up to 15 seconds notice, enough time to halt BART trains, pause surgeries, or duck under a desk. Yet gaps remain. Warning times shrink near the epicenter, and not everyone receives alerts in time. The Bay Area is safer, but the work is unfinished. Resilience depends on closing these gaps before the next big quake arrives. On October 17, 1989, the Loma Prieta earthquake struck at 5:04 p.m., just as tens of thousands of Bay Area residents tuned in for Game 3 of the World Series. Caltrans data show that instead of the usual 15,000 vehicles per hour, the Cypress Viaduct and Bay Bridge saw a fraction of normal traffic. Government modeling estimates that 300 to 1,000 additional lives were likely spared because so many commuters were already home. Yet even with this unusual reprieve, the quake killed 63 people, injured thousands, and caused $6 billion in damage. Why certain critical structures failed while others held remains partially unexplained, with some engineering documents still under review. Today, the Bay Area's population has doubled, but fewer than 10% of residents carry earthquake insurance. More than 1,000 bridges have been retrofitted, and the Shake Alert system can provide up to 15 seconds of warning. The 1989 World Series offered a rare stroke of timing, but resilience now depends on preparation, not chance.